the light of the world and the glory of Israel. Amen. Now, I have about 2,000 messages and teachings, and one of which is the Harbinger. And so I thought, let me do something different, which I was going to do the mystery of the Malkosh, which is about the end times, the reigns, and a whole thing about the mystery of the age. And I thought, well, so people are going to want to know about what's happening with the Harbinger. So I planned, okay, let me do a little bit of that. And then, so I started on that, and then it became like 2 messages. And so I had the Harbinger. And then as I'm doing this, I'm doing the Harbinger, and there's so much that's happened, it ends up, well, I end up having 118 pages of notes before I came here. I said, so I think we're going to have to hold off on the mystery of the Malkosh, okay? Maybe next year, because there's so much to share. But I also believe it's very important what I'm going to share now about what is happening. The ground is shifting. The times are rapidly changing. A lot of times, a lot of subjects that we get into, that you get into as people who love prophecy, which is wonderful, a lot of times it doesn't always have a direct application, or we don't always have a direct way we can apply it. And there's also many theories concerning the end times, and a lot of them don't pan out. But tonight I'm going to get into a mystery, end time, that is something that is literally affecting you every day, and that has every application. First, to set the stage for those who don't know what is the Harbinger, because before we move on, we have to at least set that in a nutshell. The Harbinger is the revealing of an ancient mystery that is behind what is happening now in America, so precise that it actually gives dates and times of events that are happening. It actually gives the words that American leaders speak before they speak them. It begins 2,000 and basically almost 3,000 years ago, in the days of ancient Israel, the last days of the kingdom. Before its judgment, there manifests 9 harbingers, or 9 prophetic signs in the land, warning them of judgment. But the people of Israel disregard it, and they continue in their path of defiance against God. And so a number of years are given to them. They refuse to turn back. And then in 722 BC, they are destroyed, wiped off the face of the earth. And the stunning thing, or the scary thing, or the amazing thing, is the same 9 harbingers are reappearing on American soil. Some in New York City, around which we are. Some in Washington, D.C. Some in the form of objects. Some in the form of events or even rituals with the highest leaders of the land, even the President of the United States. And it begins with a calamity falling on ancient Israel years before its destruction. The first sign is always the Lord allows an enemy to make a strike in the land. It happens to America on September 11, 2001. That's where the harbingers begin. And it's linked to a vow that ancient Israel did when they first had the strike on their land, the warning strike. Instead of humbling themselves, they make a vow. This is the key to the harbingers. Isaiah 9:10, they said, the bricks are fallen, but we will rebuild with hewn stone. The sycamores have been cut down in this attack, but we will plant cedars in their place. And from this come the 9 harbingers. Now, we don't have time to even scratch the surface of the 9 harbingers today, or the mysteries in the book, except to give just some brief mentions. The 5th harbinger, for example, is called the Gazit stone, or the stone of judgment. It will appear 3 years after 9/11 on the pavement of Ground Zero. And American leaders will gather around it and pronounce vows of defiance over it. The 6th harbinger is called the sign of the sycamore. And that is manifested on 9/11, the striking down of a sycamore at Ground Zero at the corner. There is a prophecy that basically the leaders of ancient Israel actually pronounced judgment on their land by actually saying this vow in Isaiah 9:10, the bricks have fallen. On the morning after 9/11, the American government gathers on Capitol Hill, and one man is appointed to give America's response. And that is the Senate Majority Leader. Out of his mouth on the floor of the House of Representatives, he pronounces the ancient vow of judgment, word for word, Isaiah 9:10, that literally identifies America as the nation in defiance of God. And from this, and then comes, and we're just, you know who know the book, I'm just scratching the surface, but so you have a framework. Then comes the second shaking, a shaking not of buildings, but of American power itself, the collapse of the American economy in the year 2008, which in the Harbinger opens up another stream of mysteries. One is called the Isaiah 9:10 effect. One is called the mystery of Buttonwood. The other one, the mystery of the three witnesses. We don't have time to get into that, except I'll mention one of them, which I get a lot of questions about at a conference like this. It goes back 3,000 years and beyond to the sands of Sinai, to Moses. And that the one day, there's a day appointed on the biblical calendar when all financial accounts are wiped away from the nation of Israel. And this day is called Elul 29. On that day, the nation's financial realm is wiped. Credit is wiped away. Debt is wiped away. And it comes once every 7 years. It's based on a 7-year cycle. This is called the Shemitah. It was to be a blessing, but as Israel moved away from God, the Shemitah, this blessing, turned into a sign of judgment on a nation that has driven God out of its life. So here is the 7-year cycle. The first shaking happens at 2001. The second one, the financial collapse, happens 2008. That's a 7-year cycle. But the crescendo in 2008 happens on the day of September 29th, 2008, the greatest crash in American history. When did the greatest crash happen in Wall Street? It happened on the exact, precise day appointed in the Word of God to judge a nation that has driven God out of its life and that strikes the financial realm of that nation. It was Elul 29, the crowning day of the 7-year cycle. And actually, when you go back 7 years from that crash, you come to another crash. You have the other greatest crash in American history, which happened on the exact same biblical day. The two greatest crashes to those days happened on the exact same Hebrew day. Elul 29 happened on the exact day that's appointed to strike the financial realm of a nation. There is nobody on earth who could put that together. Only the hand of God. And it happened eerily. It happened down to the hours. It is so precise. And so that's why people ask me, okay, what about the next one? I'm not telling. Okay. Then there is the mystery ground before we move forward, when simply this, the pattern is that when judgment came to ancient Israel, the destruction returned to the ground where the nation was dedicated to God, consecrated to God, the Temple Mount. And it's a prophetic warning. Well, when you go back in American history, there's a day when America began as a fully formed nation. When Washington is sworn in as president, he puts his hand on the Bible and gives a prophetic warning to the nation, which is coming true in our day, of what happens if we ever turn away from God. And what happened is, after that, the entire first government of America walks on foot from the place of the inauguration with Washington. They go to a place appointed to dedicate this country to God. And that is the dedication of America. That's the dedication ground. Where was it? It was the capital city. It was not Washington, D.C. The capital was New York City. Where in New York City they dedicated America to God? At ground zero. The ancient mystery returns to the same ground, the same place, and the warning that God is giving. And there is so much, I'm just touching it for those who have not read it, to say there's so much to say of this in the book, but what I want to share is something else, or link to this, because the harbingers have not stopped. They have been continuing to manifest since the book came out. In fact, what is in the book has been coming true to the point where when I heard about some things, I didn't believe it, and I wrote the book. But I don't take credit for the book. Because what's taking place in America, and really Western civilization, but America, has not stopped. The mystery of the harbingers is not just about the appearance of harbingers. The mystery is also about the course of a nation in danger of judgment. The harbingers appear to a nation that is progressing in apostasy to judgment. And end times, we know, well, there's the mystery of where is America in all this? Well, here is America now. There's a timing to it. There's warning comes before judgment. The harbinger came out in 2012 at the very beginning of the year. That same year turned out to be a real tipping point in what's happening around us in America. When the harbingers appeared to ancient Israel, the nation didn't repent. They defied God. They moved farther and farther until they were destroyed. What has happened to America since 9/11? Since 9/11, America has not moved closer to God. I think we can all agree on that. It has moved much farther from God. It has moved in apostasy. After 9/11 was a move actually to take the words under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance after 9/11. And in more than one presidential address, quoting the Declaration of Independence, the word God was mysteriously removed from the speech. Within the first days of the new administration, American policy was reversed on abortion overseas. An order was signed. America would now endorse the killing of unborn children around the world. Under the new government, the month of June was proclaimed Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender Month. And Americans were told to celebrate homosexuality from the White House. It is progressing. Then comes the removal of the ban on open homosexuality in the military, which is now teaching classes, which is now endorsing it, and having gay soldiers marching openly in gay pride events. The Secretary of State then made a declaration the U.S. would have a new foreign policy. We would endorse gay rights around the world, pressure countries that are opposed to homosexuality. Laws have been passed which, if fully enforced, could declare certain preaching of the Word of God illegal. Other laws were in the works that could force Christian ministries to hire those who practice open homosexuality. It's not just the federal government. When 9/11 took place, there was no state in the Union where marrying a man to a man was legal. Now there are several. Interesting, it began and spread from New England, the land of the Puritans. The Harbinger came out exactly that beginning of that year, 2012. That year was a tipping point. The tipping point is defined as the moment of critical mass, when the dynamic changes, when things begin to speed up or accelerate, like tipping over a chair. When the Harbinger was released, this was a year of tipping points. For the first time, the number of Americans against the biblical definition of marriage passed 50%. When just a few years before, it was a clear majority against it, only a third of people were for that. And for the first time, the president came out for the redefining, really ending the biblical definition of marriage. It's estimated that of the younger generation, 30 and below, 70% are for ending the biblical definition of marriage. And this is a generation bombarded by propaganda from school on. And is over every year, just if we did nothing else, if it just the old age out and the new comes, it will keep changing. On television, there are things now we could never imagine would be on television years ago. Through the internet, pornography has spread over the nation, to the point where it said every month, at least 2 out of every 3 American men are watching pornography. And as immorality comes out of the closet, the pressure grows for believers to go into the closet. You know, this was a president of a major fast food chain, a Christian, was the subject of media attacks and boycotts for simply saying, I believe in traditional marriage. That's it. That's where we have come. Something that would never be possible before. And those who have no real moral or spiritual grounding just switch their positions without any real reason for it. Where just recently, a petition by a number of Republicans and conservatives was sent for the Supreme Court to redefine marriage. And the White House was led by a man who a short while ago said he's wrestling with the issue. As a Christian, he cannot be for it. Suddenly, he switched the position. What happened to being a Christian? And now, sending a message now in this year, 2012, or last year, in the recent Democratic convention, the word God was removed from the platform, as was the word Jerusalem. When this came out into the news, it caused a backlash. They attempted to quickly do damage control. Yet when they put the motion of God to vote for God and Jerusalem, some of you saw this, it was clearly booed throughout the convention. I mean, the boos were certainly as strong as any support. And that convention won the popular vote, and then came the election. And this is not about a person or a party. This is about God and where we are. And for the first time, several tipping points, a president who said, let's end the biblical definition of marriage, was reelected. And not just that, for the first time, a state, not one, but count 3 states, ended the biblical definition of marriage in one election. By margins of 48% to 52%, 49%, 51%. This is a tipping point. And there's more talk of the end of the influence of Christians on America's future. And then came the inauguration, during which for the first time, a president enlisted the entire nation into the gay agenda. Speaking of Stonewall, a violent riot in a gay bar with violence against police officers, he put it as the course of America. This is part of the proud heritage. The president said, we are following a star that has guided us. What star? Interesting, there's one in Scripture who is called a star, but he's not good. The inauguration was also noted for the removal of two words where it should have appeared under God was removed. And for the first time, in effect, a Christian minister was banned from praying in the public square because 2 decades earlier he had said what the Bible said is sin. For the first time for believing basically in the Bible. The year 2012, it came out for the first time in America, Protestants are no longer in the majority. And largely in the Protestant realm comes those who are born again, statistically. The same poll found the number of people who said they have no faith at all has multiplied. And those under the age of 30, 1 out of every 3 will say, we're not a Christian at all. I'm not a Christian at all. Not nominal, I'm not a Christian. 1/3 of America, well, 1/3 of the future of America. And some say it's more like 4 out of 10. That's 40% of the future. The age of what could be called Christian America is rapidly ending. And now over 40% of children in America are born with no marriage and often no father. And of adults, the future is if you're 20 to 30 and you have kids, chances are 50% of the children will be born without marriage. Since that election, that tipping point, there's come a major accelerating developments. The Boy Scouts of America, a group that took much attack for their stand on marriage or gender or homosexuality or morality, they start to crumble. Another organization, Exodus International, a Christian ministry that helped get people out of that lifestyle, made a public apology to gay and lesbian groups for its ministry and closed up their ministry. They made a study of the media comparing news stories that are for gay marriage and those which are against. They found that the ratio was 5 to 1 for gay marriage. The chief umbrella just about a month ago for American pediatricians, that's doctors who deal with your children, told all American pediatricians on their list to put out pro-gay materials in their office for the children so that the children can be exposed to it. Meanwhile, abortion continues unabated. Millions of children are continually killed in their mother's womb. And for the first time, the government has begun to force or to try to force Christian organizations to actually pay for abortions. And even in the realm of foreign relations, America's relation with Israel has never been as strained as it is now, since it has been from the beginning of Israel's rebirth. And just last month, the Supreme Court issued a decision that was momentous. For the first time in American history, the Supreme Court ruled homosexuality and homosexual marriage to be constitutionally protected and labeled the view that this is wrong as demeaning, humiliating, and harmful. In 1996, Congress voted to protect traditional marriage and the definition of marriage by upholding at a federal level a union of man and woman. Wouldn't seem to be too controversial. The Defense of Marriage Act. No, but to a Christian nation. I mean, even to an Islamic nation, that wouldn't be controversial. But to a nation in spiritual apostasy and free fall, marriage becomes controversial. In 1996, the Defense of Marriage was voted with overwhelming numbers of Congress. A vote of 342 to 67 in the House. Even the Democratic Party, it was overwhelming. Overwhelming. And yet when it was struck down a month ago, its striking down was hailed by a chorus of Democratic leaders, the same leaders who had voted for the very act they were celebrating its destruction. The leaders were symptomatic of a spiritual schizophrenia in America, an apostasy. So too was that declaration, presidential act that said, June, we're all to celebrate homosexuality, because the bottom of the act, it closes with, in the year of our Lord. The Supreme Court just began the overturning of thousands of years of human morality, overturning the Word of God. They did what the prophets warned Israel never to do. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Never in human history has there been such a moral transformation taking place on this planet. And the Bible says it will happen. And the change has one precedent, though, not in speed, but in action. And that is Israel, that knew God and turned away from God. Imagine living in the days of the prophets, when a nation that had once known God was now turning away from God, was calling what it once said is good, evil, what it once says is evil, good. You don't have to imagine, because you're there. The days are now. We are witnessing a transformation, a war against the very things that America was founded on. And it wasn't just what the court ruled for. You need to know. It's what the court ruled against. Anthony Scalia, wrote for the other Supreme Court justices who said no to this. And he said this, listen to his words. He said, it's one thing for a society to elect change. It's another for a court of law to impose change by adjudging those who oppose it, hostis humani generis, or enemies of the human race. This is not a radical newsletter. This is a Supreme Court justice saying that what the decision did, in effect, is declare those who are against the redefining of marriage, or for marriage as we know it in the Bible, enemies of the human race. Ultimately, that's talking mostly about people who believe the Bible. You see, you cannot redefine sin without redefining righteousness and the righteous. When a society calls evil good, they will start calling those who are good evil. And they will call the gospel evil. And those who follow the gospel will be called evil. It is worthy of note, after the ruling, how many times on the internet the word hater came up for simply those who said marriage is a man and a woman, which everybody said a number of years back. Just a few years back, a few years back, it was two viewpoints. Then it was before that, majority viewpoint were for marriage as we know it. Before that, it was the overwhelming. And before that, nobody said anything else but that. Yet now, if you simply hold to what has always been, you're called a hater. There's no way around it. What they're saying is Paul is a hater, Peter is a hater, the Virgin Mary is a hater, and Jesus himself is a hater. Ultimately, the Supreme Court is warring against the Word of God and telling everyone else to do likewise. It is a new America where if the profound is treated as holy, or the profane is holy, then the holy will be profaned. Years ago, you would never see God or Jesus being used as part of a joke on television or comedy. Never. But you see that now. It's no accident. It's the other side of this movement, which is a war against God, a post-Christian America.
One of those prophetic voices is with us today. He is Jonathan Cahn, the author of the best-selling book, The Harbinger. Stay tuned for an in-depth interview.
Lamb and Lion Ministries presents Christ in Prophecy, a program that focuses on the fundamentals of Bible prophecy, showing how current events in the news relate to biblical predictions of end-time events and the soon return of Jesus. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Reagan.
Greetings in the name of Jesus, our blessed hope, and welcome to Christ in Prophecy. My colleague Nathan Jones and I have a very special guest with us today. He is Jonathan Cahn, the author of the best-selling book, The Harbinger, and the author of the new book, The Mystery of the Shemitah. Welcome to our program, Jonathan. We're glad to have you.
Great to be with you, Dave.
You know, you are in God's promised land here in Texas.
Yeah, up until now I thought it was Israel, but
well,
now
we got you straight
theology
okay.
Here, Texas.
Good to have you on, Rabbi Cahn.
Great to be here.
Well, Jonathan is the spiritual leader of the Beth Israel Worship Center in Wayne, New Jersey. In one of the issues of our magazine here in 2013, we featured Jonathan here on the cover. And he was labeled as the prophetic voice God has anointed to warn our nation of impending judgment. And as always has been the case, anyone who historically speaks out in a prophetic manner, calling people for repentance, Jonathan has, of course, been severely attacked. In our program today, we're going to discuss his basic message and also ask him about some of the accusations that have been hurled against him.
Well, Jonathan, welcome to our program. You have written a best-selling book that probably everybody viewing this has at least heard about, if they haven't read, called The Harbinger. And now you have a new book out called The Mystery of the Shemitah. Is that the correct way to pronounce that?
Yes, you did it perfectly.
And I think your writing has impacted a lot of people, but I tell you what has impacted me the most. And what has impacted me the most was the incredible speech that you presented at the presidential inaugural prayer breakfast in January of 2013. Unfortunately, the president was not there. I wish he had been. But it was a fantastic speech. And folks, I just want to point out that this is a speech that you can get on the internet. Just type in Jonathan Cahn presidential inaugural breakfast, and you must watch this. It's all over YouTube, and people can see it. So in that speech, you made this comment. The city on the hill, speaking of America, has grown dark. Its lamp has grown dim. Its glory is fading. For God is not mocked. No nation can war against the very source of its blessing and expect those blessings to remain. In just a moment, I want you to explain to us what in the world you meant by those comments.
Welcome back to Christ in Prophecy and our interview with Jonathan Cahn. Now, Jonathan, before we started, Dave read a statement that you made in the 2013 inaugural prayer breakfast. And he said, the city on the hill, you called this nation a city on the hill, and you proclaimed that we're no longer a beacon of light to the world and that our lamp has grown dim and our glory is fading. Can you explain those remarks that you made at the prayer breakfast?
Yeah, the city on the hill is the first real symbol ever given to America, before the American flag, before the eagle. This was given by John Winthrop when he wrote a famous sermon right at the beginning of America, saying that we shall be as a city on a hill, quoting from Messiah, saying you shall be a city on the hill. And so America was dedicated back then to God by the Puritans, and he said, if we follow God, we'll be the most blessed people on earth. If we turn away, the judgments of God will come. And people forget the next part of what he said. So we have, America in many ways, it has been the beacon of the gospel to the world, and God has blessed it because of that. It has been blessed as they said. And as Israel was blessed, any nation, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach. We are now rapidly turning from God. America is now exporting, the greatest exporter of pornography in the world. I mean, darkness. It's accelerating. America's apostasy is accelerating even in the last few days. You're watching what's happening here. We are opposing God's ways. We are really holding this up in his face. And so no nation can be blessed by God as it has been, turn away from God, defy his ways continuously, and have those blessings removed. God is patient, but that will only happen up to a certain point. So we are watching, in a sense, the city on the hill greatly darkening, where it's actually at war with its own foundation, at war with its light. That was the light of America, and we are standing in danger of judgment.
At the beginning of the program, I mentioned that the Bible seems to indicate that God never pours out his wrath without putting remedial judgments and raising prophetic voices to warn a nation. And certainly you're one of those prophetic voices today, together with others that I could name. But what about remedial judgments? Do you think God is placing remedial judgments?
Yeah. Well, this is, that is how the Harbinger really began. One of the classic signs of warning that God gives in the Bible is that it happens more than once. It happens with the northern kingdom, happens with the southern kingdom. Years before the judgment or the full judgment, there is a breaching of the nation's hedge of protection. It's a strike that happens in the land. With ancient Israel, the northern kingdom, it happened in 732 BC when the Assyrian army was allowed to ravage the land. In the southern kingdom, it happened with Babylon in 605 as Babylon came in before the Great Judgment. With the northern kingdom, it was about 10 years between that first strike and then that final judgment. With the southern kingdom, it was about 19 years. So there's not a formula, but there is a pattern. So with America, we have experienced it. The Harbinger begins with that first strike that happens when America's hedge of protection is removed. When 9/11 comes, it's a shaking of America. It's a wake-up call to America. And I think most believers even felt that. What happens is people flocked to churches. It looked like there was going to be a revival, if you remember. People were flocking. Everything was God for 3 weeks. And then after that, it ended because there was no repentance. Without repentance, there can be no revival. And so instead of going better, we got worse.
There's also a surge of patriotism. And in fact, we saw bumper stickers everywhere that said, "God bless America, God bless America." Yeah. And my wife one day said, "That's wrong." Yes. I said, "What do you mean?" He's already blessed America. We need a bumper sticker that says, "America bless God." Absolutely. And she designed one, and we printed it. Yes.
I heard of that, and I've said that. I didn't know it came from your wife. I mean, truly, that's exactly it. And the thing is that what happens if you don't come back? What happened with Israel when they had their first warning strike with this attack? They turned away. They grew more defiant instead of repentant. And so what happened is these harbingers or these remedial judgments or these signs of a nation in danger of judgment start coming one after another. And what happened with America is that we've grown worse, far worse than before that. So that's what happens when you reject God. That's what happens. So And the same harbingers, or there were identified 9 harbingers of warning of judgment that happened to ancient Israel, are now reappearing in America. They are now on American soil. Some have involved American leaders, even the president. That's why I think that the presidential inaugural had something to do with that he keeps calling me to Washington now for some reason. So I believe that without any question, we are on a progression towards judgment. Now, even if you didn't know about the harbingers, it's clear. It's clear. But the fact is, they are reappearing. And it's one after the other. It's happening in precision. Some have happened in New York City, where we are. Some have happened in Washington. And since the book, The Harbinger, came out, it has continued. They have not stopped. These manifestations of signs of warning have continued, just as America has accelerated in its apostasy. Yes. So we are in danger, without any question.
Do you see that judgments then for the nations, that Israel is the model for the world?
Yes.
So that any nation would fall under the same falling of judgments if people, as a nation, reject God?
Well, it can. Yeah. Well, the thing is that God is consistent. Number one, God is the same God. He doesn't change. And number two, the Bible says what was written to Israel is for is for us. So in other words, that's the one model we have for anything. He dealt with Israel. Israel's the center of his purposes. But anytime you hear a message preached, it's generally something that happened from Israel that applies to all of our lives. So we see that, and it's not only Israel. God also judged other nations back then. But Israel is the template, of course.
But there are just so many parallels between us and Israel.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And you've pointed those out over and over. I have over the years, too, in some of the books I've written, to point out that they had great spiritual leaders. I'm talking about Judah in particular.
Yes.
They had great spiritual leaders. They had prosperity. They had safety. God blessed them in so many ways, and just as He has done us.
Yes.
But it ultimately led to pride and to rebellion. And that is exactly what's happening to us. And Jonathan, there are people who, I run across Christians who actually think God sits on the throne wrapped in an American flag. And they say, God would never touch us. He would never touch us. What did they say to Jeremiah? God lives in our temple. He will never touch us. Yes. Let me tell you, if He will destroy Jerusalem and His very temple, He will destroy the United States of America.
Yeah.
And people need to know that.
Yeah. There is something special. I mean, there's two extremes. One is to say that there's nothing special about America, and there's no, that's not true.
Oh, that's not true.
On the other hand, it's to say that America is Israel, or that God, God is the main thing is patriotism. That's not it. The main thing is God. There's only one God. I mean, even patriotism can become a God.
That's right.
So the point is that what God says, that there's no nation, and exactly what you said, if Israel itself, which was built by God, and the temple, the Lord said to Jeremiah, that you keep saying this temple, I'll destroy this temple. I love this. It's like, he said to Ezekiel, your wife is going to die. And what God is saying is that this is how much this is hurting me, but this has to happen, to Israel. So the thing is that if that happened, we certainly cannot say we are exempt. We are in danger. In fact, it's the opposite, Dave. And that is that too much is given, much is required.
That's right.
The more we have been blessed, the more we are accountable and the more severe.
Let me read you a passage from the Old Testament and get your response to it. This, to me, is two of the saddest verses in the Old Testament. And the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by His messengers, because He had compassion on His people and on His dwelling place. But they continually mocked the messengers of God, despised His words, scoffed at His prophets, until the wrath of God arose against His people, until there was no remedy.
Yes. Here He is sending and pleading, and when you reject the pleading, when you reject the warning, there's nothing left. And and that is, I get the principle that when 9/11 happened, in rejecting any kind of coming back to God, we have so descended so much worse, so much worse. And so therefore, the only, people say, well, if there's the harbingers are appearing, is there any hope? And I say it's the opposite. The fact that there are harbingers, or there's warning, there's hope, because why would God waste His warning? Up to the point He's warning, there's hope, But if you reject all the warnings, then there's no hope.
Yes.
Now, folks ask sometimes when they read your book, they say, well, that was about Israel because Israel was in a covenant relationship with God. When the founding Puritans, the founding fathers of this country called it a city on a hill, were they proclaiming that this nation was also in a covenant relationship with God, and therefore we fell under the same blessings and curses as Israel? Or do you see that they we were supposed to be, as a Christian example, that's how we fell under the blessings and curses.
Well, a few things. One is that, the Puritans did believe that they covenanted with God. They made a covenant. Now, we can't say what God did on his side. As with Israel, we know in the Bible there's one nation that God says, I've made a covenant with. So that's, but they did. Did God honor that? I believe he did. I mean, they dedicated America, and they said this was going to happen, and he blessed America. So the thing is that, it's almost like, that's all there. There was a real parallel with America and Israel. Not that one replaces, not that one is the Israel. But they even said, they even saw America as after the pattern of Israel. They at one point considered Hebrew as the language.
That's right.
Did they really?
Thanksgiving is the Feast of Tabernacles. We're actually, it's right now. It's the Feast of Tabernacles. You cannot take that thing away. It's there. It's embedded in our DNA. It's there. So the patterns, regardless of the issue of covenant, that's not foundational to this. But the point is that they did dedicate, and there is this pattern, and God has blessed, and God is consistent in his dealings, and he has blessed us as he blessed Israel, and the principles work. I mean, they're there. So therefore, in a sense, any nation that has been blessed by God and turns away and defies God is subject to judgment. Any nation. But the fact that we have so many parallels to Israel makes it even more. And the fact that John Winthrop literally said, he said that the same judgments that came on Israel will come on us. Well, the Harbinger is saying that there is a replaying. It's not that we're Israel, but there's a replaying. God is consistent. There's a template of judgment, of national judgment, and it's happening not generally, it's happening specifically.
Yes.
Well, one of the things that has really astounded me is the speed at which America has begun to secularize and paganize. It's just on an exponential curve. Who would ever have believed, like 20 years ago, that we would have a president who every June would issue a proclamation of the celebration of sexual perversion?
Yeah.
And yet President Obama has done that every June.
And it says, and at the bottom, after he says we are to celebrate that, at the bottom it says, in the year of our Lord.
In the year, I got so upset. I'd write him every year, and of course I didn't get any response except an IRS review. But nonetheless, I finally decided to try sarcasm. So the last time he did it, I wrote to him and I said, "Sir, you're supposed to be a man who believes in equality for all and so forth. Why are you discriminating in this proclamation? Why aren't you celebrating? You're celebrating lesbianism, homosexuality, bisexual, and transgender. Why don't you add prostitutes? Why don't you add those who have sex with animals? Why don't you add those who are adulterers and those who are fornicators? We might as well celebrate it all." I didn't get a response to that either.
You didn't? Well, wait till next year. Maybe it'll come out.
Well, do you believe then that the United States, since we have removed God out of our school systems, out of our government, everything and then if we follow the pattern of Israel, are we now here at Romans 1:24 where it says, "Therefore God delivered them over to the cravings of their heart, to sexual impurity, so that their bodies were degraded among themselves. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served something created instead of the Creator, who is praised forever. Amen." And then it goes on to say how worse and worse and worse they get.
Yeah. Well, the principle is already in effect.
It
begins with, they're turning away from God. They are not worshiping. They're going after the creations of the Creator. Then it says he gives them over. Then comes sexual immorality.
That's right.
We are in that. The pattern of ancient Israel is they as you said, they were blessed. Then they sought the blessings instead of the blesser. They started then in that driving God out of their culture. We've done that. It's already been happening. The 60s, the 70s, driving him out. And then they start calling what is evil good and what is good evil. It goes right together. The more a nation calls what is evil good, it will call what is good, like believers, and God evil. Yeah. And then it started promoting sexual immorality. We're in that. They also started lifting up their children as sacrifices, to Baal and Moloch. Well, people say, well, how can you compare that with America? Well, America has not lifted up thousands of children. It has lifted up millions of children on the altar of convenience and has killed them. I mean, over 50 million children. In other words, God says, you have blood on your hands. How can I hear you? So if that's not judgment, if that doesn't cry out for judgment, nothing does. We have blasphemed God.
That's right. One thing I wanted to ask you about is this. people always ask me, do you think there's any hope for revival? Can we have revival? And I say, well, of course there's hope for it. In fact, there's even an example of it in the history of Judah. Manasseh was the worst king that they had, and they had a tremendous revival right after that with Josiah. But the moment Josiah died, it had become so ingrained in the fabric of the nation that they immediately turned back to their paganism, and God took care of the nation.
Yes, we have. There's different templates. I mean, you have that where the judgment was forestalled because of Josiah, and then and a turning. You have Nineveh totally saved. You have others where you have Sodom. There was nothing. There just wasn't there. Yeah. If I look at the culture, if I looked at my own understanding, I don't see any hope. How do you turn this around? Yeah. But with God, there's God is always greater than that. What I do believe is going to happen. What I do, and from this all the template and you following it, I do believe we're going to have a great shaking of this nation. I believe there's going to be gigantic shaking. I believe it will affect our economy. It will collapse. I believe there'll be a financial collapse. I believe it'll be more than that, because the pattern is that it escalates, just as the apostasy escalates. You had 9/11. I believe that was just a foreshadow.
And money's our God, right?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. And yes, and so I mean, so the thing is that I believe that only people say, well, if there's shaking, how is there hope? I believe it's the opposite. Only if there is a shaking, to me, can there be hope. Most of us came to the Lord because of shaking. Same with nations. Same with nations. I mean, same with nations. So I believe, people say, well, it's going to be judgment or revival. I believe there can be both. I believe it can be judgment, and yet out of that, there will be people turning to the Lord, remnant. Those who turn, there can be revival. So that, to me, that is, at this point, is our only hope. I believe that's going to happen. And I believe that God's will is that through the shaking and through this, that there will be revival and salvation among those who turn.
Yes.
But it's going to take that. We've grown so deaf that God has to shout now.
Well, one of the things that concerns me is the way in which Christians have been marginalized.
Yes.
I mean, I had Carl Gallups on this program. I think you know Carl, and we were talking about the fact that what he and I believe, the core of our Christian belief, was the core of Christianity just 25, 30 years ago. Now we're considered to be fanatics on the margin because we believe in the literal meaning of the Bible and this sort of thing.
This is exactly what happened to Israel. That's what's happening here. You had the people who were, in times past, would have been the heroes, prophets, heroes. Yes. All of a sudden, they become the marginal people. They become those who are persecuted. When they lift up the prophets of Baal, became the centerpiece of culture. They had been on the extreme. They had been on the fringe. They had been in the dark. Now they're lifted up. And the opposite is, then the culture will seek to put believers in the dark. They started persecuting the prophets, persecuting Elijah. And so Ahab goes to Elijah and said, "You troubler of Israel." And Elijah refuses to be redefined by Ahab. He says, "No, you're the troubler of Israel. I'm following God. You've departed." And that's very important. Yeah. We can't let the culture redefine us.
The
point is that's exactly the case. To the exact degree that the nation or culture enshrines darkness, calls it light, they will call the light darkness. Every time darkness or immorality is accepted, righteousness is persecuted.
And the thing that's so disturbing about all that is the number of Christian leaders who get right in bed with it because they want the approval of society.
Yeah, or that's right, because now the cost is greater. Now if someone says something, their neck is stuck out, nobody wants to do that, and then you get persecuted. But if nobody does that, then it's lost. If nobody stands up, the thing is, there's also another level of pastors and leaders who just don't want to talk about it. They will say, okay, now we can't say anything anymore. And you see this. We're in trouble if we do not.
Same thing happened in Hitler's Germany.
Yes, exactly. And there was very few who stood, and they were the radical ones. But, when you look back in history or God's history judges them as the great ones. And we have to be great. We cannot be afraid. This is not the time. When the dark gets darker, the lights have to get
One of the
brighter.
things I've been amazed at is how God has opened special doors for you to proclaim this message, for example, to the Congress. Tell about that.
Yeah, well, someone was watching me talk about the Harbinger, and they said, you know what? We have to do something. We have to get some, and also the doors open to them to open up on Capitol Hill to have an event. Because it happened because of the Harbinger, that an event of proclaiming the gospel in the Capitol to members of Congress. And originally it was once a year
in the
Capitol building, and you had members of Congress there, and you had Christian leaders and members of Congress. They asked me to speak. They had various speakers, and basically total. It was like the presidential inaugural in 4 minutes or 10 minutes. And the thing is that's been every year. They haven't had that. They told me for over 100 years. They used to have services in the Capitol.
Oh yeah.
You know. So and then this is just last month. This now has become a weekly service now for members of Congress.
Oh, that's
so I was there. They asked me to open it up. But yeah, the Lord keeps calling me back to Washington. And I think the reason is that, you know, in the Bible, when there's warnings and prophetic warnings, the Lord wants it to go to the throne. He wants it to go to the leaders.
Well, in that regard, let's end this segment by you telling this remarkable story about George Washington.
You blew my mind with that. Chapter 19. People need to read chapter 19. Yeah. The mystery ground, you called it.
Yes.
We've got about 3 minutes here.
Okay, I think I can do it. Yeah, the harbinger has 9. If there's 9 harbingers, then it leads up to these mysteries. The mystery ground is this. When judgment came to Israel, in 586 BC, the destruction returned to the same ground where the nation was dedicated to God, which is the Temple Mount. This is where Solomon dedicated the future and all that. And this is where they prayed and you know, put the whole nation in God's hand. Well, when that was destroyed, God was saying, you've broken the covenant, return to where you have fallen. Now, here's the principle. The judgment returns to the ground of consecration. What about America? America began as a nation as we know it, not in 1776. That was independence. But it was formed in 1789. First time you had a president, the Constitution. You had the president over the government. It was George Washington's inauguration. He places his hand on the Bible and gives a prophetic warning in that first speech, which says basically, paraphrase, it's in the Harbinger, but paraphrase is that if America ever turns away from God, the blessings will be removed. Then he and the entire first government go to a place to consecrate America to God. And so if we can find out where that is, that's the consecration ground on the first day dedicated to God. Well, it was the nation's capital. The nation's capital was not Washington, D.C. The nation's capital was New York City.
Right.
Ooh, here it comes.
Where was it? It was in Lower Manhattan. Where was America's consecration ground? They dedicated America to God. America's consecration ground is ground zero. Oh, the judgment, the destruction returns to the same ground, the ancient mystery, and when it happens, a shockwave comes down from ground zero, strikes Federal Hall where Washington gave the warning of what would happen if we ever turned away from God, puts a crack in there, but all around ground zero, all the buildings are destroyed except one is spared, the little stone chapel where they dedicated America to God. And the reason why it was spared, they said, because there was an object that shielded it from 9/11. The object was the harbinger, was the sixth harbinger, the sycamore. The harbinger saved the church. And the message of the harbinger is not to condemn America to judgment, it's to wake it up. That God is saying, return, return, return. I mean, you know, all our eyes, the media was focused on our consecration ground. We didn't know it. God is saying, return to America and even to his people, to the church.
And this is historically documented.
You can go there, and people have gone from all over the world to go there, and you'll see all the places.
Well, I stopped believing in coincidence many years ago. I believe only in God incidences. I tell you, that was a God incidence.
Total. Yes, yes.
Oh boy, that is an amazing story.
Yeah, and it's absolute. And God's fingerprints are all there. I mean, and that's what I wasn't looking for anything. When you
talk about God's fingerprints, when we had the great collapse of the economy in 2008, I picked up the newspaper. It was on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, if I remember right. And here was our stock market crash, and it said 777 points. And I thought, that's like God signed it.
Yes, and that was, and the timing of that. I mean, this is now we're opening up. We won't do the mystery of the Shemitah, but the point is that the timing had to do with a biblical mystery of sevens that's in the Bible. It's so exact, it's so precise. God is in charge of everything, and that's one of the things. People say, well, what do I do? Well, I said, listen, be at peace. This is telling you if you're in God's will, he has everything in his hands. So just make sure you're in God's will.
Welcome back to Christ in Prophecy and our interview with Jonathan Cahn, a Messianic rabbi from New Jersey who has been anointed to proclaim a message of warning to our nation. Jonathan, at the beginning of the program today, I said we were going to spend a little time getting into controversies stirred up by your books, and we didn't have time to do that. So could you come back next week and let's talk?
I'll come back for a controversy.
Okay.
Excellent. All right. Well, folks, that's our program for this week, and I hope it's been a blessing to you. And I hope you'll be back with us next week so we can talk to Rabbi Cahn. We'll continue our interview then. Until then, this is Nathan Jones speaking for myself and Dr. David Radin saying, look up, be watchful, for our redemption is drawing near. For more detailed information about America in Prophecy, order a copy of Dr. Reagan's book, America the Beautiful, This book is now in its 3rd edition. It has been very popular because it responds directly to one of the most frequently asked questions in the field of Bible prophecy, namely, where is the United States in prophecy? Dr. Reagan, who was formerly a professor of international relations, outlines all the spiritual principles that govern God's relationship with the nations of the world and presents ancient Israel as the prophetic type of modern-day America, showing the close parallels between the two. This book can be yours for a gift of $15 or more plus shipping. You can request a copy by calling the number you see on the screen between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday, or order through our website at lamblion.com. And when you place your request, we will include a copy of Dr. Reagan's Prophetic Manifesto, which describes in detail the deterioration of our society and the apostasy that is raging in the church. Both books can be yours for a donation of $15 or more, plus the cost of shipping. When you contact us, ask for special order number 645. Christ in Prophecy is made possible through the faithful and generous support of viewers like you. Please consider making a donation to Lamb and Lion Ministries so that we can continue broadcasting the message of Jesus' soon return. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you for joining us on today's